Auntie.
Hello, family. It's your favorite aunties, and we're back. And we are so excited about tonight's show. We have a powerhouse with us tonight. But before we go there, I will reintroduce myself to you. I am Paige Means Hopper, the author of Healing the Wounds of American Slavery and the founder of the movement of the same title. And we're super excited to be here tonight to bring you a topic that is close to, I think, a lot of our hearts, which is our families that are in mass incarceration and the effects that those incarcerations are having on our families. And so I would like to let you know that we're here with Auntie Rosemarie, who is a producer, director, and so many other things. I don't even have the time to tell you all about it. One day y'all will know. And we also have Auntie Genoa, who just popped back in. Hey, Auntie Genoa. And she is an artist. She's a grandmother. She is so many creative things, and definitely a community gatekeeper. And we have with us tonight, Chaplain Farabee. This is Dr. Yavanka Farabee. She holds a doctorate of theology from the HSBN International School of Ministry. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration from Mount St. Mary's University. She is a master chaplain and holds various licenses and certifications in the insurance and the real estate industries. She is life coach extraordinaire, and she is also a life strategist. Welcome to the show, Dr. Yavanka Farabee.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure being here. I'm a big fan of the show, and I'm just humbled and excited to be here.
We are excited for you to be here. We're going to learn a lot tonight. I know it. I guarantee it. So, as always, we're going to go ahead and read from the book, Healing the Wounds of American Slavery. And this is a book that it took me 20 years to write. Why? Because I had to go through all of the wounds that are in the book, all 10 of them, and all the sub wounds, the fear, the contained rage, and all of these wounds that have been passed down intergenerationally. They are generational behavior patterns. And so it was hell. It was war. And I'm on the other side to tell you all about it. So I would love for you to hit like, subscribe, and click that notification bell as we build our audience here at Healing the Wounds of American Slavery and Heaven on Earth Empire. As usual, I'm going to read tonight from the book. It's going to be a very short passage, but I have to share with y'all. I was telling the ladies before the show began that even as I was creating the artwork, the graphic for the show, and it was the painting of the little girl reaching into a cell and her father's arm reaching out in that familiar orange uniform that we all know so well. I mean, I had to walk away because it was just so emotional for me. And I think it's emotional for the village. And a lot of it is because we just don't know what to do. But Dr. Yavanka's here to share some things that we can do. But before that, we just have to sit in this for a minute and contemplate it. So to help us do that, I'm going to read from page 113. And this is a very unusual passage for me to read. And I didn't think that I would ever read this on air like this. But it is a very personal letter from my heart to the hearts of Black men. And so I'll go ahead and read, and then we can begin. I'm already about to lose it. Help me, Lord. And Auntie Genoa will be back as soon as she can. Dear Black man, we need you. But we need you in your strongest and most natural state. Please do not reject, abandon, or shame us when we tell you what we need that only you can provide. No shade to other men, but there's something special in you that you were born to share with us. Please remember that you were born to protect and provide for Black women. Your mother, wife, daughter, your sister, your cousins, and aunties, sweetheart, your friends, and neighbors. We need your protection and provision, and that's why we crave your irreplaceable presence. Your love cannot be replaced by money. We need you.
Mm-hmm.
Your love cannot be replaced by education. We need you. Your love cannot be replaced by prestige or accomplishments. We need you. There's an empty space in the souls of Black women that can only be filled by your magnificent presence in our lives. Black fathers, brothers, male cousins, friends, neighbors, we urgently long for you to reclaim your rightful throne. There are plenty of Black men standing for and with us, and we love you, thank you, and appreciate you for that. But, Black man, there are too many of you who are not. Do you know how much it hurts us when we need you and you are not there? It hurts just as much as when you desperately want to provide for and protect us and your hands are tied by circumstances. Feels hopeless and helpless, doesn't it? Be strengthened by our love, brothers. Be empowered by our standing with you. Be empowered by your new awakening. Be comforted by our presence. We believe in you. We miss you. We're pulling for you. We're pulling for your recovery of strength and confidence. We need you. And we know you are fighting to make your way back to us whole.
Mm-hmm. Whew.
Wow.
So from the heart.
Where are they?
Wow.
And there are so many, too many of them who are incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the men.
Yes.
There are a lot of women as well.
That number's on the rise, by the way.
And that is on the rise. And so we just want to talk a little bit about, no, we want to talk a lot about the effect of mass incarceration on the village, on the Black community. And I know that Dr. Yavanka is an expert in this field. She has an organization called Beyond the Shackles that is designed to support in so many ways the families that are affected by mass incarceration. And there are so many ways in which they're affected. And so I want to hand the mic over to you, Dr. Yavanka, and just ask you, what do you think is the most outstanding effect or the most devastating effect that we need to pay attention to regarding this subject?
It's so much. And the one reason that I am a fan of your show is because you talk about things that people sometimes they tire of hearing about, or it brings about a shame response depending on who's, listening. It could be Black or white. Black people, I find, sometimes are very ashamed of a slavery heritage. But the reality is that the separation of family and the not having any rooting or grounding in culture and a belief system, that has continued throughout the generations, and we still see it today. We don't have defined roles in the family like other cultures have because of that slavery history, because of the separation that has occurred. And then the culture itself, and I'll just say the United States, but it's really around the world, but the United States, the culture of not having marital unions, and that provides a staple for strong families. And I mean, it's shown statistically, it's shown that, two parent households, not even perfect, but two parent households, the kids have a better grounding and an opportunity to have more success in life, more self-assuredness of who they are, more ideals about family that help them continue to feed and develop and to healthy children that grow up to become participating members of the society. So when you have all of those different arenas at play, coupled with you talked about the school to prison pipeline and incarceration, that's just modern day slavery.
Yes.
Modern day slavery. So when you have a system set up where, and I'm not saying that people don't take their own personal responsibilities,
right,
but if you put someone in a situation in poverty where they have to make decisions that other people may not be faced to make, you'll get results like what we see, for incarceration. And when people come from impoverished communities, you have more trauma. Now, one thing I could say about prison culture in terms of what they're doing to become more restorative as opposed to punitive is they're starting to finally look at the effects of trauma and how that affects a person in before incarceration, which leads to incarceration. So when you have poverty, you'll see a lot of domestic violence. You'll see a lot of gang violence. You'll see a lot of boys and girls having to make decisions, sometimes for their own survival, sometimes it's by even tradition, because when you don't have a solid family background, then you make counterfeit families. That's what gangs are. They're counterfeit families. So now you have multi-generation gang members who now are expected, even in many instances, to perform in gangs. This is something that you don't see outside of impoverished communities. So in impoverished community, you talk about Black and brown communities.
So what I think I've heard you say then is that it's a combination of factors. It's not just one. And it is that historical context of slavery and enslavement and the separation of families, which has continued along this continuum all the way. I mean, even in some ways, in worse ways now than it was then, although you can't really make that comparison.
Yeah.
But it just, then we had absolutely positively no choice. Now we have choices, but we are, I think, kind of behind the 8 ball and making those choices because we don't feel that we can because of the wounds that are damaging our belief systems. And also you've talked about poverty and trauma. So it's like a vicious cycle of that historical context, the separation of families, the trauma, and the poverty, which leads right back to crime. And also that the systems are set up, right? So that crimes are more prevalent than they normally would be in a different setup or a different culture.
Yeah.
I was reading about the Clinton administration. And I mean, I've always studied it, but I went back and refreshed my memory for this session. And one of the things that Bill Clinton had to go back and admit, because I mean, all fingers were pointing back to him, all legislation was pointing back to him in his administration of the, what was it? The
3 strikes.
The criminal justice initiative that included 3 strikes. And so I wanted to ask the other aunties to jump in and, tell us about anything that you want to, whether it's someone in your family that's affected by this right now, or, what are some of the trends you're seeing? What's affecting you in relationship to these trends?
Well, you know what? I just have to go back a bit, if you don't mind, with the letter. I've read it before, but just to hear it in terms of this subject, it's right here. But what I want to bring up, and it's Dr. Yavanka, is about how are the prisoners coping with, especially when they're not guilty. And I'm hoping I'm not jumping too soon, but this is just something that's on my heart. I've had people in my family, go to jail, but not prison terms. But it affects me to see, because my sister drove families, because the prisons are way out. So she drove families out to see their their loved ones in prison, and they have a hard time getting there. But
Yes.
back to,
Yeah.
how do they cope um, when you're not guilty?
No, this is really good too. And I'm going to throw it back to Dr. Yavanka in just 1 second. I just wanted to put this in so you
Okay.
could maybe speak to this also.
Mhm.
That the Clinton administration said that they cast too wide a net when
Mhm.
they created these initiatives and
They
this
did.
legislation. And then with the 3 strikes and the idea of a super predator, that it began to, as you said, Auntie Rosemarie, bring men into the prison system who didn't even belong there.
Yes.
Literally did not belong. And especially
Yeah.
because a lot of them had mental illnesses that were not addressed as opposed to just being imprisoned. So,
Mhm.
or incarcerated. So, Dr. Yavanka, can you speak to that?
Yeah. So, and most of my work, I'm starting to do more work with women in prisons. However, the bulk of my experience is working in maximum security prisons with men. So it's very interesting because I've met many, many men who were a product of the 3 strikes. They have initiatives that are letting them out, particularly they have life sentences and they haven't offended in many years. But I will say I have met men who literally, when you say cast too wide of a net, what that looks like is maybe somebody might have had a drug problem and they did something that garnered 2 strikes. Well, because of the drug situation, for instance, I know a man who busted out a car window and to steal something, and he got caught, and it was a 3rd strike. So he got a life sentence for busting out this car window to steal whatever was on the seat. I met another man that had got a 3rd strike for stealing a motorbike, and got a life sentence. So that's what that looks like when you talk about casting too wide of a net.
Okay.
So, and there are many people who are guilty in prison, and many who say they're innocent and they're not. And they're
Right.
not.
Right.
And it's interesting because I have inmates that they have an interesting take on that as well. But to speak to what Auntie Rosemarie is talking about, when somebody is innocent, I understand why she's asking, because we have a particular case that we were interested in. One of my the men that was incarcerated, one of my students in one of my classes that I had volunteers facilitating, went to prison along with 2 other gentlemen at the age of 17 for a crime that they did not commit, and DNA evidence was buried, and he had no adult representation. Who knows where his public defender was not even in court, and he wouldn't take a deal because he was innocent and got sentenced. Well, what really helped him is he garnered a strong faith in God. When he first got to prison, he was cutting up a lot and fighting, and and he was a kid.
Right.
But soon after being there for a few years, he just kind of put 2 and 2 together, like, this is my situation, so I'm going to make the best of it. He had an inner a peace inside of him. He said he believed the Lord was telling him he's going to get out, but he had no idea how that was going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
So therefore, he did whatever he could in terms of what he felt prepared him for release. So that he took advantage of whatever the opportunities were that kept him busy. He kept his circle small. He kept his circle positive, because, and it was other like-minded men who, even whatever their time, whatever they were doing in this prison situation, they did it. They wanted to stay alive, for one, but 2, they wanted to be better men.
Okay.
They wanted to be, that's the thing. People, they want to be seen. They want their image to be intact. And so if you don't have a strong image of who you are, an image of likeness, then you start fashioning something or trying to. So for them, for this group that I'm thinking of, it was like, okay, what kind of man do I want to be? And they didn't have any other examples, so they had to build it. They built it from the Word of God. They built it from reading positive things and doing what they could to stick together.
Okay. And so this was one of these opportunities that they were taking advantage of.
Yes,
Is just the building together as a
yes,
unit, as Black
yes,
men.
and
And from the
and
word of God, that
educating
was a good
themselves.
foundation. That was a
Yeah,
good foundation, I have to admit.
and
Uh,
educating themselves about who they were.
who they are.
Mhm.
Okay. Auntie Genoa?
Okay, well, even though I like what you're saying, the problem is the reason why the prison system is the new plantation is because everything that goes on in the prison brings money to the
Oh
people
yes,
that's
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
running it. They run
It's a business.
multi-billion-dollar businesses out of the prison system,
Hmm.
and there. I remember there was even a judge that was sending young Black men into the
Right.
prison
Yeah.
system just so they can have bodies, and he was getting money. I had read an article with this guy. He had a plant that was employed 150 people, but there was a prison in his community, and he said, "Hey, can do you think your inmates can make my product?"
My
And
widgets.
soon as
Right.
they said yes, he closed down his plant and fired 150 people that's on the outside just trying to take care of their families, and he moved the business into the prison. And I even made a phone call because I was working inside sales, and we were doing ink cartridges or something like that, and I was talking to the person that answered the phone. He said, "Ma'am, you called the prison, ma'am. You
Wow.
called a prison.
Yeah.
Because that's where the company was.
It's a business."
Wow.
And I really like that point too, because that's what keeps that cyclic pattern going, is that there are so many investments from so many perspectives and layers
They
that
can't
are
go
involved in
off.
the prison system. And so I kind of wanted to bring it back into what's happening with the families.
Hmm.
Because the system is going to do what it's going to do, and we're definitely going to talk more about that. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Auntie Janelle, because that's one of the main factors. One of the main factors.
And I
And
do
it's
want to
so
speak
profitable.
to it because what she's talking about affects the families. One of the hardest
Yes.
conversations that I had with a group of inmates who they were complaining about the officers and how the officers don't do anything. And I heard they make, $80,000 a year. And I heard they make this and that. And I had just left a meeting that was talking about what Auntie Genoa was talking about the contracts and and so I really, the heart to heart that I had with them, I said, I really want you guys to understand my heart. I said, the people who benefit off you being here and off you not figuring out how to take advantage of whatever opportunity you can to prepare yourself so that you can stay out of here, you can't see them. Everybody you can lay your eyes on, they're just a means to an end.
Right.
I said the Tyson Chicken Company, the whatever, the top ramen companies, whoever has a contract for all these things, that's the real money. And they count on you when you get out, messing up again. You're already trained, free staff.
Right.
That they can pay you pennies on the dollar, and you can come back in here and get right back after this work.
And that's called recidivism.
The recidivism rate, and if somebody's listening, the recidivism rate is the rate somebody goes back to prison once they get out within a 3-year period of time. And if there's drugs involved, it's usually going to be about 3 months.
And what about if there are guns involved?
I haven't seen any statistic on guns. But
I would think it's even more.
It would, especially if they're already kind of on the radar, and they get targeted, because you get on a radar. When people get out and they have 2 strikes and they want to stay out, they're terrified because they know that,
one false move and they're back.
One false move.
One false move. I mean, really like a tiny little.
Yeah. So to speak, so what I told them in that is that even this class it's really a Band-Aid they're throwing at a situation that say they're doing something by having these classes. I said, but it's what you have to take advantage of and work on your benefit, to do what you can to prepare yourself now, because you have different challenges when you get out, but you're building a foundation so that you can be who you need for yourself, for your family, and for your community.
Yes, and one of the viewers spoke to that. They said the mental shackles. There's a unique wound that happens as an aftermath of prison, and we know that to be true.
Yeah.
So, what is happening with what is happening literally? Can you give us a picture of what's happening in the homes of these men and women? Regarding what Auntie Genoa brought up, which is, or may have been Auntie Rose, but one of us brought up the distances that the men, I think it was Rose, the distances that the families have to travel, and especially when they keep moving the men and women around and around. Also, these phone companies that are making so much, I mean, tons of money off of the phone calls that are made in the prison, putting money on the books for snacks and food, because from what I understand, the food is so horrible in most prisons that the men are resorting to, you know, top ramen and honey buns and all these other things to survive, just to, you know, fill their bellies. And so what's happening at home as these men are going through this in the prison system, or women and women?
Well, just to say the honey buns and all that, that's if you have money on your books.
Right.
You know,
so the families are spending money.
Otherwise, you have to take whatever they give you, and if you don't have anything, it's a whole other thing. But to your question about what's happening to the families, what happens in these family dynamics, what I learned from going in there, sometimes the men and the women who go in the prison, they're the most stable person in their family many times. So. And I'll give you an example. There was a young man that was coming to my class, and he was talking to me, and he was new, and he was like, "Well, you know, if they ever let me out of here, it's going to be some years, but I can't even go home. I can't, can't go home because the class." And let me clarify: the yard was a protective yard for men who defected from gangs.
Okay.
You know, there's a process in prison for that that's acknowledged by both the gang and the prison. So once you do that, they have to move them out of general population, and they're on this yard.
Okay.
So he says, "I can't go home." And he said, "Yeah, my mother, she called me soft, and she did this and that." And I'm like, "Your mother called you soft? What do you mean she called you soft?" And long story short, he was like, "Chaplain, my mother's in the gang. They're not happy about what I've done." He says, my father's in the gang, and my cousins, all of my cousins, he says, "I cannot ever go back there
because they can't get out.
They
can't get out.
Yeah.
Once they're in, they can't get out.
Yeah. You know, and even when you don't have that dynamic, say you have a dynamic where I'll just say there's a man in jail, and he has a family at home that's dependent upon him financially.
Right.
And he was getting his finances by ill-gotten gains. He was maybe dealing drugs or doing what he was doing. But now he's removed. And because it's been like that for so long, they don't know how they're struggling. And they can't do anything from in there. So then they end up resorting to crime inside the prison. So then they start running the drugs inside the prison. So that happens sometimes.
There are a million hustles in the prison.
It's a million hustles. And it's not always just because somebody just wants to get in trouble. They literally are like, "I don't know how my kids are going to, I got,
exactly.
So they make decisions even when they want to do the right thing sometimes. And so also because of the fragmented relationship, what happens when, say, a man is in there for a long time and his wife and kids are at home, and then they learn how to become independent. So then he doesn't know his place anymore. He's trying to, inject himself into a family.
And they no longer need him.
They don't need him. So that causes a whole nother dynamic. And when he does get out, the kids don't they're like, "And you are, and who you talking to?
Who are you? And you can't bother me now." Right.
And they don't go to him for anything. They don't look to him for anything. And so the family really needs to be prepared. One of the things I was talking at a symposium inside one of the state prisons is that they need to have a structure. It would be helpful to have family counseling once somebody has a release date, starting a year before they get out, and include the family.
Yes, absolutely.
Family, not
absolutely.
Just, so that they understand about the transition, some things that they can do to help with the transition, so that they have a better success rate as a family when they get out.
Thank you
You
for
know,
that. That's a beautiful thing.
Okay,
I
so
was
I just gotta
go ahead.
interject.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You know what? When okay, so I hear you saying that people have to do what they have to do, and they turn to crime inside. To me, that's just another survival um, way of life. It really is because if they just had the chance, and that some other groups get, it
hmm
wouldn't be so bad. But I want to hear about when they cope. How do they cope? The family's leaving, the family can't get there, or the family gets all the way there, and then there's no, they may not be able to see them for whatever reasons. Who are they talking to? Who are they going to? How are they surviving? Because this is a lot. First of all, I'm taking a scenario where you in prison, especially when you didn't do it.
hmm
Right.
Then your family, then you get family saying, well, did you? Then you have some family members, no, I know my son, my husband didn't do that. So you got all these pressures. And then the pressures of the gangs and whatever laws and rules and things as the prison life that you have
Yeah.
to get yourself involved in. And then it's just that is a lot of for someone to deal with, especially if they're innocent. So
Right.
they
And I
got
don't want us
to
to
get
skip lightly
out.
by that. That's such a great
Yeah.
point you made. I don't want us to skip by that some of these men really are innocent. Some of
Yeah.
these women really are innocent.
Yeah.
And then it takes forever for their case to even go to trial. And so they're in there
You
forever
can't make
suffering like that.
bail. You can't. So
You
you
can't do
you have to
anything.
be in there with guilty people,
Hardened criminals.
with hardened criminals.
Yeah.
And what happens? You have to find your place
Yes.
really quickly. And a quick example I can give you, and this is not even an African American. This is a Caucasian. I got a call one day from a woman whose son, he went to prison because he got into a fight. It wasn't his girlfriend, but it was somebody that I think he liked her. He was 18 and she was 16 or something like that. Well, there was a man down the street that tried to accost her, tried to rape her. And he
Mhm.
went down there with a knife because he was angry. But what happened, because it was a grown man, they got into a scuffle and he ended up using that knife and he killed the man.
Uh-oh.
So I did a phone visit with him, and this is someone, he doesn't have anything against black people ever. He wasn't raised like that, but the skinheads got him immediately
Yes.
because of protection. But I'm gonna tell you, this did not end very well. So I counseled with him, as well as I had someone who had been inside in my network. We
Hmm.
did a couple of video visits with him, and within 3 months, they killed him. And they killed him because he would not kill somebody. They wanted him to kill an African American man.
Right. And the
Oh,
skinheads, for those that don't know, is a major white supremacist group inside the
mhm.
prison, outside the prison.
And
They're gang
he joined that group not because he wanted to be a skinhead. He did it because he was
for protection.
afraid. He had never been in trouble in his life, but because of this fight in this situation, now he's facing. And let me tell you, it's no different from a lot of our young boys that
Yes.
are going to prison. They have not. They're not hardened criminals, but then they have to learn how to survive. I've
Right.
literally had one young man, a Hispanic young man, in my class that was being sexually assaulted on a regular
Oh my
because they put
God.
him. He was 18. They put him in a prison cell with somebody who was a sex offender and a
Mm.
murderer, and he was changing overnight. And I was like, what is going on with him? And so they said, they put him in there with this man, and I got angry. I said, why doesn't you guys help him? And they said, okay, chaplain, if we help him now, what about tomorrow?
Right.
What about? I said, he's just a kid. They said, I'm sorry, chaplain, but there are no babies in prison.
And he's got to sleep in the cell with this man.
Yeah, he said,
And
there's no
so they
babies
can't
in
protect
prison.
him in that cell with him at night. They
Nope.
can't.
They said he's gonna have to learn how to protect himself. He's
And
gonna have to
sometimes the only
learn.
way they can protect themselves is to fall into the role that they're being mandated to fall into by
Yeah,
whoever is terrorizing and
yeah,
harassing them.
yeah.
I was teaching a class on children of divorce, and one of the things that we talked about is when either one of the parents is missing, what happens then to the child? And so I drew a diagram with one circle on the left and one circle on the right, and then it interlocks. So the little tiny circle in the middle, that's the child. So here's mother, the father, and the child's in the middle. And so when one of the parents leaves, if the other parent doesn't absorb responsibility for that child, then they're going to fall through the cracks. And what happens literally anyway is that that child's emotions break into a million pieces. And so now they've got to try to figure out, mentally, psychologically, physiologically, and otherwise, educationally, what they're going to do with that child. And when both parents leave, which is a lot of the cases in these incarceration cases, both parents are incarcerated.
Yes.
Then what happens to the child? And the statistics are very high that child themselves are going to then turn to crime because who's taking care of them?
Yeah.
Or they fall into the foster care system. And so there's just so many factors that go into what happens when a family is involved one way or another in the mass incarceration system. And the system is definitely set up to absorb all of those who are on the margins, on the fringes, and poverty. We talked about that. Having gone through mental trauma. So this is it's really useful to talk about these things. Auntie, you look like you have something on your mind.
I do. The thing is, what I hate about the new plantations, what they do is they hasten the financial demise of the family all around, because the family they're trying to make it, but it's like, okay, they're on the outside and they have bills and stuff that they have to take care of themselves, but they're still having to give to the person that's inside, and it's not it's not enough. I used to have to go visit a relative, and I had to get there an hour early. I had to do all the little stuff, give my ID and all this other stuff, and then I had to wait. And if something happened, I would just be sitting there waiting for my turn, and if they can say, "Oh, that block is not getting a visit today," but I had to drive, get there an hour early and go through all these hoops, and then I was still waiting for a half hour. It's just like a whole process in order for you to get
and don't have on the wrong clothes. They won't let you in.
A 20-minute for a 20-minute visit, and maybe a half hour tops, and everything. And I was giving. I had to make some boundaries because I wanted to reach out to this person and make sure they were reading. I'm talking about the Lord and everything. They were doing things that that person had to do to survive in there. It was at war with who he wanted to be.
Oh my God. So how did you feel as you were going through that process of, them checking you and taking your license, and you literally as the family member going through the process to get into the prison? How did you feel? Take us through that.
Okay. First of all, everything that you had required some money out of your hand. The parking, you had cash. That you could only park in a certain spot. Then you had to walk a long way to go in. Then once you got in, it's a whole bunch of people milling the bus. They're all trying to person. Whatever time, either a whole hour before it even started. And if you went and after they checked you and took your license, once you went in, if you needed to come out for any reason, then you had to go through you couldn't take anything in there. They had lockers outside that you had to pay for. You had to pay for the lockers.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, all your stuff had to go in there except for you couldn't take any. You really could not take anything. And then you're sitting there watching everybody. You see some people with children and their little kids and everything. And I was just looking at even just the amount of time, the energy, and the money that the family had to spend. You had to spend just to get in there and hope that nothing goes wrong, that you can see the person. It was terrible. And then when you see them and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, because I know if I'm going through this stuff is light for me because I can leave and go home.
Right.
They stuck in there.
And so it's traumatizing to see them there, and you can't take them with you either. And I would imagine for children, it's even worse.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing that they don't understand. They're seeing mom, they're seeing dad, uncle, brother, whoever it is. And then they have to turn around at the end of this visit, this mundane visit, I would imagine, you know, eating food out of machines and all of that, vending machines and that. And then leaving.
Expensive. Everything was expensive. The little vending machines they had in there for the people sitting in there, everything was expensive.
So like $5 for a Snicker bar.
Like the movie.
Can I just share with you one experience that
yes, please.
Yes.
There was a visit. Both the man and the wife were in prison. Mm-hmm. So this particular prison, I won't say which one it is.
Okay.
But they house both men and women in different areas, you know, because they're waiting. So there was a family visit for the women. So the wife of, you know, the mother was there with her children. Her children were about 10 years old or 9, somewhere around there. Then they had, just coincidentally, the men were coming around the other side waiting to see their attorneys, you know, for their case. Well, the father of the children, they walk them in and sit them down against the wall, and the little boy sees his dad, and he goes to run to his dad, and the mom grabs him because she knows he can't go there, you know. And she's trying to explain to him, oh, you know, dad, and he was like, but their dad is right there. Right. And the man had to just sit there. He better not have said anything. He just had to look at his son, and you know, you could tell he was looking at him as to say, I see you, but he couldn't say anything.
He can't say anything.
He couldn't talk to the boy, couldn't talk to his dad. He had to act like he wasn't there. They literally had to refocus him, and you know, so that they didn't get in trouble, you know, because they didn't match up. You know, I'm sure they weren't paying attention that this was going to happen. Right. So, but the anguish, the little boy, he obeyed, but he was confused, and then he was getting ready to cry, and he was trying to, you know, wipe his tears. I was like, this is too much.
That is traumatic. Yes. That is real trauma.
Yes.
When you have to feel like that sense of lack of control, you have no control. You have no recourse and no access to the person who's sitting right in front of you. That's your father.
Yeah.
And even if they had known Dr. Yavanka, you know, I mean, the system is what it is. And it's such that, you know, whether they knew or not, and the situation came up, it was going to be where the boy could not. That is really a great demonstration of how, although it's probably just a slight anomaly, not too far off.
Yeah.
What happens with others as well. And I often think about children who go into, you know, the prison to see their parents and what effect that has on them, especially the younger ones. And a lot of mothers then are making the decision whether or not, you know, they're even going to take their children for visits.
And what they do sometimes, kids, they have their way of keeping control, because you don't have control when your parent's not with you or whatever. And they do things. Sometimes it hurts the parent, the mother or the father. Like they're looking forward to finally having this phone call that's supposed to last 15 minutes. But a lot of times a child will end it before. They'll say, oh, you got, you know, 3 more minutes. Oh, I'm just going to get off the phone now. And the mother's like, don't you want to just talk 3 more minutes? No, I'll talk to you next time. It's their way of like, let me control this. They'll do that with the mother and the father.
Right.
And it's hurtful. Like I had a woman that was crying because she's like, you know, my son always gets off the phone, you know, early, but they do that. It's not that's not an anomaly. It happens quite a bit.
They do that. My niece and nephew. My niece is now 4 years old. No, she's 5. She just turned 5 years old, and so she had taken a trip, and her mom wanted her to talk to Uncle Michael and Auntie Paige real quick while we're on this trip. You know, this is Auntie Paige and the little girl in person. I mean, we just have bunches of fun, and she loves me, and she never wants me to go home. But you know, the phone is an apparatus that is just, it's impersonal. They don't get that. And so she picked up the phone, and I say, hi. And she's just nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. And then, she didn't want to stay on for more than 30 seconds. And we have to also take in mind a child's attention span.
Yeah.
That they only have so many minutes per age. Like if you're 4, they've got 4 minutes. If that depends on the child, really. So there's that factor too. Who wants to talk to someone, who they know they're not going to see later? Like if it's a call from mom or dad's job and they're saying, hey, I'll see you later for dinner, then that's one thing. But just to be on a call with someone that it's kind of a dead end conversation. How are you doing in school? Okay, great. Who are your friends? You can only do that for so long. And as to your point too, about trying to parent when the child has forgotten totally that relationship and the connection's broken.
Yeah, and they don't listen. One of my inmates got upset because he has 5 kids and he had been at home, and but he got a life sentence, and it was for something he did. It was for drug dealing, and so he was trying to
parent from inside.
Because he, at home he was the man, right?
Right.
So finally,
I don't mean to laugh, but at home he was the man.
He was the man. So, but his wife ended up, becoming a Christian, and she got really on fire for the Lord. And so she started having a prayer group at her house. So he would call when he felt like it. And the wife had been telling him, do not call at this time because I have my prayer group. So his teenage daughter would answer the phone and say, Mom said that for you not to call at this time. And let me tell you something, he was hot. He was like, I said, well, you have to understand, you're in this class, because he's also a believer. But I said, now your, wife, she's trying to have some structure. She's trying to, raise her kids. You're not there. And he was like, well, okay, I understand. But he was mad at the daughter. He's like, well, if I said go get her, and she's like, no, they're in their prayer.
Mama gave us the rules, and she said, don't come get her out of her prayer group for anyone, including you, the man.
Especially, she had told him, please don't call at this time.
Right.
And he's like, well, I don't have that much control over my time. I said, but you don't have to call at that time. You can call it.
Right.
And
sometimes it's go ahead.
No, I just want to, what? I'm so upset about this topic. I'm so passionately pissed off because I watch a lot of court cam and court things where I see where, unfortunately, we are treated as, our crimes, although they're the same crimes as another group of people. Our time is like 20 years as opposed to 5 years. And it could be the same. The crime can be the same. And so that is stacked against. Then you get in there, you got 20 years, you got life, or then you got your family. It's hard to get there. My sister explained to me, if it's hard to get there. So now you got your family not being able to get, now you got your kids growing up without you, they can't talk on the phone. It's such a bad situation. And it seems like that we're just doomed to, we need to get, it needs to be more structured. The kids need to have counseling. There needs to be a better structure, because the way the system is right now, it's like we're set to fail, because you go in and you're not getting this equal justice. You're getting, because of the color of your skin, you're getting more than the other person that's getting with the same crime, or sometimes their crime is more. And then we're getting the more of time. So this whole situation, and then you're in there, you're innocent. I'm sorry to bring it up again.
No, it's okay. But you know what you're describing is a system, and a system that's been set against us since our feet landed on this soil.
Yeah.
And so what I always like to bring it back to, okay, we know that the system is set against us. So then what are we going to do about it?
Yes.
And that's where I am.
And that's my talk track to the inmates, because they're the only ones that can control their aspect of what they do.
That's right. And I was talking about the Clinton administration, January 93 through January 2001, when all of this, all these laws and all these programs, start coming into play. But that's also when the term super predator came up. And let me tell you what that is. You talked about us being sentenced to longer sentences than others. And that's because the laws, the current day laws, the modern day laws, are built on the Clinton administration and the term super predator. So let me tell you what the term means.
Mhm.
It means a youth who repeatedly commits violent crimes as a result of being raised without morals. So that
Wow.
means that there are villagers in our jurisdiction who are being raised without morals, being raised without something to do, being raised without watchmen and watchwomen, carefully structuring and cultivating who they are, recognizing their gifts and talents and channeling them down those pipelines opposed to the ones that are set up for them. And so the responsibility falls back to us. It
Mhm.
really does, because
Yeah.
the system is going to be what the system is, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially now that AI has come into play, because now they can track our children, like they're going to start sending drones around.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's really coming down to a point of our own protection of our own people, and particularly our children, because they are, I hate to say it, but Whitney said it best, they are our future.
Future.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have to be the ones. And
Yeah. You're
so
absolutely right. You
yeah,
absolutely. You have
and
to
the
start
three
early.
strikes law, that three strikes law is so deadly, because at the end of the day, if a child, okay, for example, we know a young man who both of his parents were incarcerated.
Mhm.
And so he went to a third relative and did very well in school. Michael and I were part of his village.
Mhm.
And we were definitely paying attention to his academics and all of the things. And but the thing is that when it's in our DNA,
Mm.
there's almost nothing we can do about it unless we recognize that and shift those trends.
Yeah.
But then that he just, he did a few crimes, like minor things.
Mhm.
He's on his second strike and he's in now. Hopefully he'll be released within the next few years. But then his child is now being raised without his father. And so it's cyclic. It really is.
Yeah.
And so, like, I really appreciate what Dr. Yavanka does. I really, really do, because I'm impressed by it and I appreciate it, because what it's doing is it's, as Gary Hardy was saying to us, Gary Hardy Jr., when we were talking about the school to prison pipeline, she's putting her hand on the whole, right,
Yeah.
of the prison pipeline and extending other pipelines that the families, the children, the men, the women who are already
Mhm.
incarcerated can walk through. Another point that she made that was really great is that they do want to do better. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. They do. It's human nature to
Yeah.
want to be the best that you can be. But when you
Yeah.
don't know what to do, and as the super predator definition says, you aren't taught the correct morals and guidelines just to live from day to day as a productive citizen, then what else is there to do? There are two kingdoms you could fall
Yeah.
into. There are two kingdoms.
Yeah.
It comes down to that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to speak to that, I had to make some adjustments when I first started doing this work in terms of seeing what progress actually looks like. Some people have to come so far from ground zero just to get to ground zero that you have to recognize. An example I can give you, and he's out now. As a matter of fact, I'm going to meet up with him very soon. But one of my students, I mean, when I say that he was a fighter, he fought. He was in a. When I say fight, I mean fist fight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he stayed in trouble fist fighting, and then he was finally trying to get it together because he was 30-something years old. And he was like, so he had spent 8 months not being in a fight. But then what happened, and I didn't know about this. So what happened, he the way he says it is that I don't start it, I finish it. In other words, he says they ordered a pizza, I just delivered a pizza. That's what he used to
Wow.
always say.
Okay. All
So
right.
so he ended up getting in a fight. So he comes to my class, he's like, Chaplain, I don't know what the punishment is gonna be, but I got in a fight and I feel really bad about it, and they're probably gonna send me to the hole, but I don't know, and and so, and he looked at me, he said, but I feel bad about it. And I said, well, okay, you feel bad about it. He said, no, you don't understand. He says, this is the longest I've ever gone that I can remember my life without having a fight. It's been 8 months. He says, and every fight I ever had until 8 months ago, I never felt bad about it. He said, never. He says, this is the first time I feel like I let myself down. And I let down. He says, I've never felt that before. And
what was the
progress.
difference? What was the difference?
He had been applying himself in terms of really, learning character developing things from the Word of God, from other coursework. He had positive friends that were also studying with him, and they really do encourage in each other. So he had a different a different network. He had a different network. So and he had also defected from gangs. So he got into this group because they try to. There's a Christian group in there that'll try to grab you real quick too, so the other ones don't get to you. So he was in that group, and so he had spent time with them. They're not getting in trouble and doing all the stuff, and so he experienced that, and he was proud of himself because he was able to make that improvement. So when he got
for 8 months,
he was like, he was like, man, how did I let this happen?
So did he get more time because of that?
They could possibly get more time. For him, he didn't. And I think because this is another thing with officers, you have some bad officers, but you also have some that recognize when somebody is trying to do the right thing. And so sometimes it'll take a long time before they make a decision. It's like, am I going to write this guy up and send him to the hole? Is that going to tip him too far over? And now all is going to be like, they make these kind of decisions and they don't verbalize it because I'm sure they're not supposed to make these kind of decisions.
Course not. Yeah.
So they make them and they're like, and they'll just go ahead and be like, okay, but if you do this, I don't know you, and so that's it for you, Right. But they'll make those kind of decisions. And then it's interesting, you have officers too who are also believers. And I've seen them on the slip. One guy, he got in trouble. Some guy and they had him all twisted and tied up on the floor. And so when I walked past the officer, it was an officer walked past, and I saw him kneel down and say, "Read 1 Corinthians, so and so and so and so." And then he went and shot off in that direction because they're not supposed to do that. So,
that's really great.
And the inmate looked up at him like, what?
In the middle of all of this, here we go. You're telling me which scripture to read to get at that. I appreciate that, though. Yeah, we have one final comment from one of our viewers. She says, or he says, on the last comment, which was regarding the mental shackles and the aftermath of prison, what people go through. On the last comment in Jackson, Michigan, I had half my family in prison, and the other half were guards. Wow. State prisons are big business. They are big business, and they're going to do, as I said, what they're going to do. But, it's incumbent upon us to figure out what it is we can do. And that's why we need to bring you back for a part 2.
Oh, yes.
Because we're now out of time. And I'm going to have to go ahead and wrap. But I wanted to ask Dr. Ivanka, if you could take 1 minute, just 1 minute, and give us some final thoughts. Give us some food for thought.
One of the things I would say, it's not just about, of course, you have people who are innocent in prison, who, get, convicted and they shouldn't be there. But you have some people who are guilty and want to take responsibility for what they've done. And they want to change. And I was challenged early when I believe I was called to do this work, that will you love them even if they did it? So that changed my whole trajectory on how I approached this, and God really did a shift in me. So what I would say, please be open to the fact that people can change and that change is possible. Yeah, it's possible. So many people are sealed off that they said that person is a criminal, that person is a convict. And really, when they come out, they paid their debt. They paid their debt. Yes. And depending on who it is, particularly if they have, done a lot of work and self-healing on the inside. And with some prisons, it's not consistent across board, but many prisons, these are becoming more prevalent and available to them. We do what you can. If you don't have to support them in relationship, but at least, particularly in the church, we have to
embrace them
and embrace them and give them a chance to live a good life.
Very good. That doesn't embrace them and give them a chance to live a good life. DY, go ahead and take us out, and we will see you all next week where we will have another exciting topic. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Ivanka.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Auntie.